software ignores layers completely. Everything should be on layer 0. It ignores anything that's not a line or polyline. If you want text, you have to text explode it and then hatch it, which is a pain. Nothing 3D, no splines, nothing volumetric of any kind. Everything on layer 0, and the color determines the layer that the software puts it into. So you can have objects that are red, green, blue, whatever, and set red to be 100% power, 20 millimeters a second, green to be 50% power and 200 millimeters a second, etc. So the laser software itself, let's see, we should have something. If you go to open, it's got its own silly file format, and if you go to open, that's the only format that it will be able to deal with for everything useful, needing and important. Oh, here we go. Raspberry Pi box. Okay, so this drawing has got 2 colors in it, actually, which I don't think is intentional. Black and almost black. And this one's set for really slow speed, which is probably not correct. But yeah, this software is really limited. You don't want to do any kind of editing in here. If you want to scale something, that works fine. If you want to move it around, you can kind of sort of do that. So if you want to make, like, if you have a whole sheet and you want to tile 20 of these guys, you can do that in this software. But it's pretty awful. It's got some really bad, terrible English translations in it. Like, what's bestrewing breath? I've never figured that one out.
What's what?
Bestrewing breath. I don't know. If anyone ever figures that one out, let me know. It's a really, really bad translation by the Chinese on this one. The one thing that I ask you, if you see it in here, there's an option deep inside the software where you can edit the firmware settings on the machine. Please do not edit the firmware settings on the machine. Don't ever fuck with that. Other than that, there's really nothing in here that you can do that'll break anything. So, anyways, let me make sure the laser power's off. If I tell it to start, it'll download the file and then it'll just immediately go. So right now the laser's off, it's fine. Stop. I can also hit download. That thing's got an internal memory that actually has a decent capacity. Now if you send it a file named default, that makes it the current pattern. If you send it a file named anything else, it makes it the current pattern and it saves it, so that later on you can reproduce the pattern directly on the machine without having a computer. You can't edit it in any way, so. But if you have something you want to make 100 of, get it right, save it to the machine, and then
how much memory does the machine have?
I've never filled it up, and I've put over like 100 complicated files on it.
Huh?
It's probably only a couple megs, but it's enough. You can also file output. It'll save these RD files, which is the machine's native language.
RD, you said?
Yeah, and I've got hanging off the front of this thing bottle opener, which is very important, and also a 2 gig FAT16 USB drive. It has to be FAT16 and the files have to be 8.3, but this thing does have a USB port on it. And in the interface on this machine itself, you can copy files back and forth between the internal memory and the USB stick. You can load files, you can run files. Basically, if you have a pattern pre-compiled, someone else can be working on the computer doing something and you can be cutting. What else is there? Really, I think that about covers it. Anybody have any questions?
Where do you source acrylic from?
What's that?
Where do you get like acrylic or whatever?
Oh, the place that I usually get it from, it's kind of far from here, but it's the only place I really know of, is the shop called Plasticare, and it's down in Santa Fe and Oxford. You can look them up on the internet. They sell bulk plastics, any material, any quantity. The bed size on this is 900 by 600 millimeters, roughly 2 by 3 feet. So if you have a quarter sheet of any plastic, they all come in, what is that? 4 by 6. 4 by 6 is substantially size. So if you have a quarter sheet of anything, it fits really well in here.
You said it cuts wood also?
Yes, and wood you can actually raster scan, you can get some nice depth.
So what's the thickness of that you don't want to go
I
past?
have found anything more than about an inch, you start to lose focus. Now that doesn't mean you can't, like especially with wood, you could load a 4-inch thick piece of wood. Just know that you're not going to be able to cut it all the way through. And when you're figuring out your power level for the raster, you want to shoot for no more than an inch deep. So the beam will spread out. Instead of a nice focused line, it'll just make a smear. And the other thing you'll notice is if it's not in focus, there's an air pump down here that its whole job is to shoot out through the head. It does 2 jobs. Number 1, it keeps smoke off the lens, which is made of zinc selenide. It's a very silly, very fragile material. Keeps smoke off of that so that it lasts longer. And the other thing it does is that it puts out the fire, because this thing really does burn and melt through anything you put in it. So that air blows the fire out. And every once in a while when you're cutting something, you'll see it flare up, or sometimes there'll be like a little flare that kind of follows the beam. That's fine. If it's out of focus, it'll actually light a fire that maybe it won't be able to put out, and maybe it'll just start the plastic on fire. Not good.
So what other fire precautions can we take?
If you see it like actually starting to catch on fire, which, I mean, it's not like dramatic. It'd be dramatic if you walked away from it and let it go. But if you see it starting to get out of control, stop the machine and just should be enough. Pull the material out. Don't get dramatic and discharge a fire extinguisher inside the machine. You will ruin the whole thing. All the electronics, all the lenses, they'll be garbage at that point. So.
What about CO2 fire extinguisher?
Probably be okay. I think the cold would probably break the lens, but I mean the point is, if you're using the machine correctly, it should never come up.
Got it.
Yeah, if you're I haven't ever worked much with wood, but basically when it's cutting, stand in front of it and watch it. Don't, unless you know for a fact, because you've punched this pattern out 100 times before, and you're only and you're going to be right there anyways. Okay, that's fine. But especially if you're experimenting and screwing around trying to get your pattern dialed in, don't hit start and then walk away from it. Watch it and make sure it's doing what you want it to do. And if it is starting to, I think it got thrown away. Is it still here?
No, yeah,
Oh yeah, here we go. Ted was trying to raster scan something. Don't let it get like this. When you see it starting to catch the plastic on fire, just clearly it didn't work out and stop it. This was just a teeny tiny piece. Probably took about 30 seconds to do that start to finish, but keep an eye on it. There's all kinds of little tips and tricks and techniques that are hard to communicate. The more you work with the machine, the more you'll kind of get used to its idiosyncrasies and how to make things work really well.
Who makes this?
The Chinese. And I re-engineered it. This is a company called Denhac. Yeah, they don't believe in emergency stop switches. They don't believe that things need ground. They don't believe that 26 gauge wire is unacceptable for 240 volts.